Welcome back to the home build. Today is an awesome day. They're in there sheetrocking. So they're putting on the wallboard in the house, and we're gonna go through, show you some of the process of them hanging sheetrock, and then we'll talk some about taping and texturing and that sort of thing, and that sort of thing. Show you the process. So it's exciting. It's more progress and that sort of thing in the build. Sometimes, you know, if you're building a home, things get frustrated because you feel like it should be going faster than it is, but it's part of the process and that sort of thing. So try to be patient, but at the same time, make sure you're double checking everything, that it's being done right, because sometimes people do miss things and that sort of thing. So do your homework, make sure you're checking everything's going per plans and that sort of thing. And everything seems to be going pretty well so far. I've been kind of well on top of things for the most part. But let's go in and let's take a look at them sheetrocking. Well, we're up here on the second floor, and it's quite the change. So they've already got their first coat. They're taping of the joints, taping the corners and their butt joints and their horizontal joints as well, or taper joints. So they got that done. The corner beads, they've already got that. Now they got all their first coats and their second coats on the majority of it. So there are some areas where they only have their first coat, like the corners and that sort of thing. It's kind of a process because you can't really kind of go over everything all at one time to give it a first and a second coat. Sometimes you got to go over one area, let it dry, and then go over the next butting or joining area, such as the corners. So they'll put the tape in the corners, and then as far as the sides, they might get that, but then their second coat, they just do the butt joints, and then they'll follow back and do those corners again. If they're trying to go up and over, it just, you can't get a good even finish when they're coming together. So, but on our corners, we had elected to have metal corner bead. So on metal corner bead, you don't have to have that tape that goes over it. In some cases, such as fire rated walls, it's actually required not to, because the thinking is that it could have air bubbles and that sort of thing underneath it. So just going over that, the tape. So we did do paper tape, which I'm very happy for. I don't like that fabric tape. To me, it just gives a better finish. But any of the horizontal joints, so they elected to have their boards horizontal, which is great in this case for wood construction. If it was metal framing, I'd rather have the boards going vertical. It creates a flatter surface. But with framing, wood framing, things could be just slightly bowed more so than metal, and so horizontal is, in my opinion, just a little bit better. So as far as screws, 5 screws for every stud and that sort of thing. Top and bottom, they are 4-foot wide sheets, 8-foot tall ceilings. So ceiling board, so a little bit different type of sheetrock. There should be 5 screws per stud as well, minimum, or per truss or floor joist, depending on what type of flooring it is or ceiling it is, and that sort of thing. And they had good cutouts of where our outlets are. That one there, maybe they messed up and it was one side or the other, is why there's so much drywall mud on that. Hard to say, but that's kind of what that looks like. Otherwise it would be more like this, a nice good clean cutout. So see the door frames haven't been installed yet. That's kind of the correct process. So you're not running sheetrock on in and around and that sort of thing. Now the windows, on the other hand, we're electing at this point in time not to have any wood trim casing out the windows. So they ran corner bead, sheetrock butting into the window frame. Later on, I can always add wood over top of it to give it more of a decorative craftsman type style, but budget's exceeding, so that's an area that I can do later. So, but tape, they did put corner bead. They put a little tape in the corners and as they're rounding over. So they still got a couple coats to go and sanding as well. So they should be, once it gets, there's some spots that are still, because they're built up so much. They were out here yesterday and the day before. There's still some areas that are still pretty wet that they got to get it nice, good and dry before they do any kind of sanding. But I suspect they're going to be out here shortly, and they still got certain areas where they're going to have to add a second coat, such as the corners. So they don't need to wait for this to dry any further. They can go right over it. But there are some areas that I have to touch up, scrape, or sand for that second coat. Temperature wise, when you're doing sheetrock like this, it needs it to be a pretty uniform temperature that is going to be what it's going to be for kind of its lifespan. If there's a big difference in temperature, let's say it's all real cold in here trying to put this on, for one, it's not, the drywall mud's going to take forever to set up. But two, when it does heat up, everything's going to expand, and vice versa, everything's going to shrink. So you're more likely to have cracks and that sort of thing. So we got our furnace going. It's about 70 degrees. You know, the lifespan of this house is going to be somewhere around 68, 70 degrees here in the Northwest. That's just our comfort area for up here and that sort of thing. So having that furnace going to have that good central heat throughout, it helps with drying, because this drywall mud puts a lot of moisture into the house while it's drying. So open a window, close the window every now and again, just slightly, to let that moisture out. If your HVAC system has a dehumidifier, you don't need to do that, and that sort of thing. So gotta have that heat, constant heat going. So if somehow the breaker's blew during this process, it could create some cracks and that sort of thing as things are drying out, shrinking, expanding, that sort of thing. But it should be pretty consistent right now. Down here on the first floor, things are looking really, really nice. You can see that the dramatic change that happens once you put the drywall on the walls. Everything kind of opens up, brightens up, which is awesome. Fair amount of windows. Later on, I might elect to cut in those windows later, but things are looking pretty darn good for right now. Down here on the first floor, we got 9-foot ceilings. So as far as sheetrock goes, this top layer is 54 inches. Excuse me. The top and bottom sheetrock, they're not 4 foot wide. They're both 54 inches. So that's 4'6", 4'6". Add that together, 9-foot ceiling. So you don't have to just get 4 foot by 8 foot sheets. These are 54 by 12 foot long sheets. So longer the better, less joints you have. The wider the better for less joints. Instead of having 2 joints, if this was 4 foot, I'd have 4 foot, 4 foot, and a 1 foot rip. That's 2 butt joints. Now I got only 1 joint. Makes a flatter wall. So the sides of sheetrock are tapered. So this tape joint can go right in that tapered section and create a nice flat transition going through. So if these walls were stood upright, or excuse me, if the sheetrock was stood up going vertical, there's nothing saying you can't do it vertical, other than trying to get the flattest wall. For metal stud framing, to get the highest level of finish, you don't want these butt joints right here. So the ends of the board are not tapered. So where they come together, you got some buildup. You got tape, and then you got layers of drywall mud, and it's not quite perfectly flat. You're just gonna have a real hard time doing that. So, but what they are gonna have to do is float this out much farther to get it as flat and smooth as possible. So if these sheets were standing vertical, there would be no butt joints, and there are only side joints that have the tapered. So therefore, you're gonna have the flattest wall as possible. So I think the way things are going, it's gonna work out really nice. All the windows, sheetrock's brought into it. Got a couple more coats on certain areas, 1 more coat on others, and that sort of thing. So things are looking really nice. Down here, over here in the office, kind of bathroom area, I got a bunch of fans going in certain rooms to help dry out the process. So when they do get here, it's good and dry. They just keep going. They don't have to wait on anything for things to dry. So even I got my storage room down there. Storage room back in there, that only needs to be fire taped. So I'm hoping there's certain areas they need to go at least another coat over. Either that, or I'll come back and do a little more to get better finish. So let's go out here, let's take a look at the garage. They haven't started on the garage yet. That's gonna be an area where it's gonna be last. So you can kind of have a good view of what it's like before drywall mud. Gotten their screws, so the wider board, instead of having 5 screws, they'd have 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 per stud, which is great. Same with the ceilings. Ceilings looks like they got 4 foot wide sheetrock instead of 54 inches. So things are looking good. Cutouts for lights. And then I got one over here for a LED light that I added for a little more lighting. And they cut everything out and around all my electrical boxes. electrical panels, which is great. So now I can just add that on and seal it up. So add the cover on. All right. You can kind of get a good view of your sheetrock. So it's labeled 1/2 inch. So we're using 1/2 inch board. It's walls and ceilings. Things are looking good. Here's a view of the corner bead. So they do have plastic ones as well. We got metal. What I was saying before is they actually put a little piece of tape across the corner here, and then they mud right over top of that. Okay, no taping, no fabric. So fire rated walls, that fabric is not to code. They want that tape so to fill in all these holes, these divots, that sort of thing. The theory is, I guess, tape, the fabric tape, could have air voids behind that tape. So I'm told. So back here in the house, so the walls, the texture that it's gonna have is a orange peel, and it's a real light orange peel. So some people think, oh, well, if it gets orange peel, you don't have to do quite as good on the joints. That's a false statement. It's a very light orange peel. So any holes, divots, any of that sort of thing, it'll still show right through. So making sure your joints are nice and clean, sanded well, floated out well. So they're gonna come out a little whiter, even floating these joints out on the corners, and as well as the inside corners. So the ceilings are gonna be different though. So it's gonna get a brochet. It's kind of a skip trowel type finish, and it looks really nice. I like the idea of having two different textures architecturally. In my opinion, it looks good, and that sort of thing. But before they texture the ceiling, they are gonna spray a primer, a drywall primer on everything, so it doesn't flash and that sort of thing, which is great. After they texture, I still have to primer though. So don't think that because they primer before texture, you don't have to primer. You still do. That texture will really suck up that paint, and it's good to have primer before you paint. Okay, so we're gonna see some more of the process and some more coats and that sort of thing. Well, as you can see from behind me, the drywallers completed installing all the sheetrock, and they got their first 3 coats on the wall for drywall tape. Drywall mud, drywall tape, that sort of thing. You can see here that's the bare minimum is 3 coats in my opinion. It's the tape, then it's your rough coat to fill in the void, then it's a medium coat, and then your final coat. But sometimes you can get away with less, but that to me is like the minimum in this case. So the corners, however, they've done 2 coats, so they should be coming back through and doing a 3rd coat, feathering it out a little further. the bare minimum is they're gonna leave it like that, textured. But this should be feathered out farther. So I gotta check to see if that's what they're gonna leave. And I'm thinking that they're probably gonna leave that. It is real close, but it's still such a small area that's ramped up where the tape is that it's still gonna have a little bulge. And they should feather that out further. So let's see, I'll check with that. But you can see the returns on the windows. They look good. They still have to come back through and do a lot of sanding. So if you're good at the taping, you should only have to do your one-time sanding right at the end. And sometimes it's just a wet sponge going through and feather it in. But sanding for this big stuff, whereas a sponge won't get rid of the bump, it kind of spreads it out. So it looks like it goes away until you put a straight edge against it. So sanding is a flatter, wider surface for taking care of any sort of unevenness. Not sure if you can see that. Yeah, there you go. So, but it looks good. It's amazing how much brighter things brighten up with adding the sheetrock. So it seemed like it was pretty dark and we were like, oh, no more, we need more windows. But now we got sheetrock and we're here soon. We're gonna be painting and it's gonna be even brighter. So the next steps besides sanding, and hopefully they can add another coat on the corners. So besides that, they need to prime the walls. So that's important to seal up the sheetrock, seal up the joints. They're gonna be using a quick prep interior drywall primer like this. They're gonna be spraying it on, so they're gonna be masking off all the windows, the doors, that sort of thing. So they'll spray everything and then they'll texture afterwards. So why texture, or excuse me, why prime? Well, it preps the surface for the texture. If you don't, it'll flash here and not so much here, and it could give a discoloration. So I'm very happy that they're gonna be doing that. Here's the master bedroom. Looks so much bigger when it's got the sheetrock on it. So when they, what I finished doing was the garage, and as well as underneath the stairs was, it had a fire tape on it, which that means it has just tape and one coat of mud, the bare minimum, that seals it up for any kind of fire, makes that fire, it needs that fire rating. And then, so what I did is, I don't want to be out there in the garage staring at an ugly drywall with ugly joints, so I went ahead and put another coat on it to feather it out, smooth it out, that sort of thing, getting it ready for a sand and then a paint. Out there's no texture, no need for it, but it's gonna be a little better than just the fire tape. Same thing underneath there. I could let it go and say, all right, just good enough, but I want a little more. So before I forget, there's one more I wanted to show you. So you can see in one of the previous part of the video where the sheetrock stopped, it stopped right about here for this nail flange of this tub shower. There's a nail flange there, so the sheetrock stopped right there. So what they did, instead of going up over creating this bulge, they stopped it and then they added a hot mud. And hot mud is a trade name for a quick set drywall compound. When you mix it up, they have different ones. They have like a 20, a 45, a 90, and that sort of thing. So depending on how much time you're wanting it to set up. So a good thing about that is that you can get a coat on real thick. It'll harden up pretty quick and you get another coat on it. But it still needs to set up and dry well. Get all that moisture out of it before you paint. So don't think just because it's quick set, that moisture's still there, it's hardened, but that moisture still has to get out in order to paint. So otherwise you'll be blistering and your paint will be failing. So just wanted to kind of show what that was looking like. That took about a day and a half to dry with a fan and a heater on it, so because it was so thick. So, but it looks good. So by code here in Oregon, a moisture board, it's a sheetrock that it's supposed to be resistant to moisture. It only requires, or a green board is another name for it, mold resistant, all that sort of thing. There's a few different names for it, but it's a green board that goes on the top of the shower. It doesn't require it for the lid, the ceiling, or the walls. So that's why there's green board there and not anywhere else. It's just, that's the minimum and that's the code. If I was doing it myself, I'd probably put it everywhere. Commercial, it is still required everywhere. So in a bathroom sort of thing. But also, if I was to tile, the steps that I would take would be different. So vapor barriers and Schluter systems and other things. So that's not the case here. We're still just sticking with the tub and shower tile, or tub and shower unit. Well, that just about wraps everything up for sheetrocking, taping, mudding the walls, and that sort of thing. So hopefully you enjoyed, and like always, be safe out there, and I'll see you next time on the home build.